Passion itself, it literally means to suffer. Passion means to suffer. So I think one of the messages I would really share with folks is embrace the suffering that you endure in life, because a fulfilling life isn't about me. It's not about you, but it's about the people around you.
On this episode of the Creators Community, we'll meet Steven Mezzacappa, a business development engineer for one of the largest commercial construction companies in America, and a young man who can now add published author to his list of many accomplishments. We'll learn how Steven found an early passion for architecture and also helping others find their purpose. We'll hear stories about Steven's personal struggles with mental health, how he found a way past the struggles, and the model he's developed to help himself and many others looking to take control of their lives and live a greater life with purpose. Check out the show. Welcome to the first season of the Creator Community. This is a brand new podcast series from book publisher New Degree Press. I'm your host, John Saunders, founder of Forward Advisory Solutions. The show is designed to celebrate, elevate, and showcase many of the incredible authors that have published their books with NDP. This year, NDP will cross over 1,000 published authors. In this show, we will get to know the authors and their books, as well as give you a behind-the-scenes look at their journey. We'll find out what it takes to bring a book from an idea to being available wherever you buy books online. It's no easy task. Today, I have with me Steve Mezzacappa, author of Passion with Purpose, The Fire Within, Building a Life of Fulfillment, Destiny, and Impact. Steve is a business development engineer for Turner Construction Company, one of the country's largest commercial construction management firms. He graduated from the Pennsylvania State University with a degree in architectural engineering and was recognized as the nation's new face of civil engineering in 2016. Having a passion to build buildings since he was a child, Steve has grown to develop a passion for people and is on a mission to inspire, encourage, and empower others around him. This mission serves as a cornerstone of Passion with Purpose, an organization and movement founded while Steve was in college that he continues to operate today. Steve's book just published a few weeks ago and is available wherever you buy books online. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey, John, thanks for having me. Really excited to be a part of this podcast.
You know, I can't wait to dig into your book. It's great to have you, but we can't wait to dig into your book. But I think a good place to start is learn a little bit more about your background and career. Could you share with us a bit of that story?
Yeah. So like you mentioned, I graduated from Penn State in 2017 with a degree in architectural engineering. And I'm sure we'll get there. But one thing I've always wanted to do my whole life was build buildings, right? So, aside from building buildings, my dream is to work for Turner Construction, the company I work with now. So I began my career with Turner when I was 19 years old, an intern out of my first year of my freshman year of school. And I went on to continue to do 4 consecutive internships. And I talk about it in my book a little bit with Turner. And most of them were in Philadelphia. One of them was actually international in Mexico City, which was a huge experience that I had that really led to a lot more inspiration for this book. So I spent a couple years out of Turner's Philadelphia business unit. And now I live in Pittsburgh with Turner, and I work in business development and sales, which is a whole other world of construction. It's a really exciting part of the field to be in.
So you've had a pretty broad experience, had a little global exposure in there. That's awesome. Getting to work in Mexico. Where do you think your interest in architecture came from?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Growing up, my dad was he built residential homes, and then so at an early age, I would walk to projects and see what he was building, and I just loved being in the field on those homes, walking around and seeing things being built and being brought to life. So that's where the spark was brought about. So at an early age, I was always hands-on. I like getting my hands dirty, and I just like building stuff, and 9/11 happened when I was about 7 or so. And it's interesting because a few years after that, my aspirations went from building homes to wanting to build commercial high-rise structures. So I would say beginning in 7th or 8th grade or so, is when I really had these desires that went from just wanting to build regular homes to wanting to build mega structures and superstructures and skyscrapers. And that's kind of how I first learned about Turner. I was, only in 8th grade, and I knew that they built some of the world's largest buildings, and that's what I wanted to be a part of. And fast forward now, here I am, working with them. It's quite a surreal experience in a way.
I mean, I feel like it's been in your life. It's been in your life forever. Were you a kid who liked Legos did you play with Legos as a kid? Right.
I was obsessed with Legos, Connects, and then even 3D puzzles that came out when I was like in high school, which I still had a lot of fun with. So yeah, always liking to build things with my hands. But it's really interesting. Even before the aspirations to want to build, I wanted to be an author, which is crazy. I used to literally grab the stack of paper out of the printer, staple together, fold it, and say authored by Steve Mezzacappa. So it's really it's really interesting how my dreams and aspirations came to be. And I talk a lot more detail in the book about how I really formed a lot of my dreams. But it's really interesting because I think things do come full circle. Again, like I mentioned, before I even wanted to build buildings, I wanted to be an author and I want to inspire people. So it's really interesting that even though accomplishing my dreams now, I still have that deep desire to really mentor other people, encourage other people, inspire other people.
That's awesome. So it's really the book and your career seemed like just part of the journey you've always been destined to be on. That's awesome. We mentioned in the lead in your introduction that you founded this organization, Passion with Purpose, while you were in college. How did that happen, and what really motivates you to keep it going today?
Yeah, it's a long story, so I'll try to be concise with it. But the idea of it really started as early as my freshman year of school. I grew up in Staten Island, New York, a pretty big city, but I went to high school with about 1,000 students. Could be decent sized high school. But once I went to Penn State, it was large, 40,000 undergraduate students, so a lot of students. But one of the biggest things I noticed right away on college was just like this culture of peer pressure, right? And individuals going into a new environment and feeling as though they needed to be someone else to fit in, right? And I think that creates a roadblock for really being truly authentic. So that was one of the first ideas. I was like, wow, one thing I noticed and observed, I was like, it'd be great if more students were empowered to really be their true authentic selves. So that was like part one. And there's like 3 parts to how it really came to be. Part 2 was I was involved in a student organization called Bridges to Prosperity. And this is a global nonprofit organization. And their mission is to end poverty caused by rural isolation through the development and construction of footbridges in other countries abroad. And so I was a student. I traveled to Panama twice to work with communities in developing these bridges so that the community members would have safe access to school, healthcare opportunities, and marketplace opportunities as well. And one of the biggest things I learned from those experiences was that it wasn't about just going down there with the tools and resources to build a bridge, but there was a lot of this internal leadership that happened within the students traveling and also within the community. It wasn't just about going there to help build a bridge or, go through the engineering with the community to build it, but it was really about inspiring, encouraging, and empowering that community, right? And in this experience, I had this experience like what it's like to have a passion with a purpose, right? And before this phrase passion with purpose came to mind, it was passion in action, like this powerful thing that happens in the hearts of everyone involved in an endeavor when one's passion is being put into action, not for the benefit of oneself, but for the benefit of someone else. So that was part 2 of that experience. And then part 3 was kind of what led to this book and realizing that passion is actually complicated. It's not, a lot of people say follow your passion like it's a noun or a hobby. But in my book, I really like to take that head on and redefine passion as not something that you follow, but something that you truly experience and cultivate and build within you. Like passion is not like a noun, something you love to do, but it's the way you meet adversity. So all those stories coming together, that's really what led to the idea of passion with purpose happening and kind of aspirations moving forward with what I like to do with the organization. When I was a student, it was a club, but now there's been advanced visions for it that I've been developing and putting together on paper. What it would look like to have passion for purpose is university chapters, industry chapters, life coaching, speaking, a variety of different things. But if I had to put it in a nutshell, the whole idea of passion with purpose is to really empower others to live out what their callings are, despite the adversity that comes at play.
I really appreciate these concepts around authenticity, being yourself, being something where you can help others and make the world a better place. I can't imagine that experience and seeing the power of building these bridges for people. We take so much of this for granted. And here you are, like these people couldn't get to the hospital or things like this before. And here you are helping them. What an unbelievable story. Mm-hmm. So quite an incredible journey that led you to building this organization. Let's talk a little bit about your book journey, right? How did you become an author? How did you get from this idea to actually having a book published out there in the world? And how did you fit it into your life?
Yeah, it was, I'm not gonna lie, it was very hard to fit it in. And, and there were a lot of times I wanted to quit. I wanted to throw in the towel. Those closest to me saw the challenge of it, especially my dog, Toby. He was probably one of the biggest encouragers. He was actually always in the room with me whenever I was writing, which was always encouraging. But, it's interesting because like I mentioned, I wanted to be an author my whole life, but sometimes that's not enough. There has to be a why to ground you. And the vision for this book specifically started around my senior year of college, and this was, right around the end of 2017. So about 4 years ago, it took to really make this happen, and I tried to go to self-publishing route, but I just, again, how do I fit into starting a new career was tough, right? I just didn't have that discipline or that coaching or like that, and that true empowerment to really make it happen. And I think what really helped make this book a reality was the support from New Degree Press. They didn't just give you the resources you needed, but they gave you editors, coaches, and deadlines, because I remember one of the biggest things we learned up front with Professor Eric Koester, who really put this whole program together and continues. It's an amazing, and if anyone wants to be an author out there, really look up the Creator Institute and New Degree Press, because if it wasn't for that program, this wouldn't have happened. But back to the story of it, I've learned that I was a deadline writer, which is another nice way of saying procrastinator. Now, I knew that coming into the journey, and I told myself, Steve, you're not going to be a deadline writer this time. But yes, I was a deadline writer, but long story short, I think having those deadlines and people that come alongside you, that helped me. Like my marketing revisions editor, I would go to like, look, Cynthia, I don't know if I'm really going to get this done. She's like, you're right, you're going to get done. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to get done. So you're going to get it done. And that really encouraged me. And, my discipline was really tested, and I had no choice, but I had to make some sacrifices. And, I didn't realize how, one of the biggest things really from writing the book too, I didn't realize how distracted we are in life, whether it's your phone, work, family. I had to wake up early when everyone was sleeping to really write, sometimes 3 a.m., sometimes 4 a.m. And I would say about a third of my book was written 2 weeks before the final deadline. And those were in the hours between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. That was the only way to really make it happen. And I think one of the things that really helped aside from the deadlines was just a clear vision for the book. And I really thank God for that, because, my book is definitely rooted in my faith, and we'll get to that, I'm sure. But that clear vision, it wasn't just about me or just trying to live a dream anymore, right? It was, I think that what helped me stay true to this motivation was that this book would help others. And I think that's what really helped solidify and ground me in making it happen. Because if it was just to, achieve a dream, I probably would have gave up. But because it's bigger than myself, and there's a lot of different themes and concepts like such as mental health in it, it's a serious, important book with important themes to me. And I didn't want to give up on that, because, it was one of those things where if I gave up on it, it would continually be in the back of my mind.
That you wanted to get it done.
Yeah.
Just for a little bit of contrast, there are different styles of writing, right? So you were more the deadline writer. There's also the episodic writer, and there's also the consistent writer, which was more my approach, just kind of pecking away at it a couple hours each and every day. And so one thing nice, and just sort of contrast, I think, to your style, was what's great about, I think one of the great things about this program is that it's choose one, which one works for you. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate the fact that, it was your passion, this energy to help others that really pushed it along, which clearly has been a theme in your life. So as you look across and think about others that might consider something like this in their future, what advice would you give to a first-time author?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest is, and again, it can vary from person to person, but I think there's no shame in getting help and getting an editor or going through a program. I think it's very easy to have this vision of being an author, like just hanging out in a coffee shop by yourself, like a very isolated experience. But I think if you go about it in a collaborative environment where you're building relationships with other authors, getting coached, I think that is so powerful. That will really help you go from dream to reality. And I think another phrase I've heard by many others, and I think even some authors, friends in the program had said this too, that's done is better than perfect. If you try to be perfect, it will never get done. One of the biggest challenges I encountered was all these different ideas. And so much so that I literally created a separate spreadsheet. And by the end of me writing the book, I had about ideas for 20 other books. So you have to realize you can't fit it all in one book. That's okay, right? You're just beginning the journey of being an author. I feel as though if you have the aspiration to be an author within you, it's not just a one book thing. It's really a lifetime of that you want to cultivate and continue forward. So I think it's really putting yourself in community and then coming true to locking down your desires and staying focused and being disciplined.
Such an important part of the journey, because it does take a lot of energy, and you have to have a big why behind it. And I think many do, but then it's also having that discipline and structure to get through it, which is so important. We talked a little bit about this, but let's dig a bit more deeply into your inspiration for writing this book. It seems like it's a natural outcome of your lifelong journey, but let's dig in a bit more there. Where did you really find the inspiration?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like you mentioned, it's a culmination of a lot of my life events, but also where I want to go with those. So if I had to name a few things, I think some of the biggest inspirations was one, my relationship with God, huge inspiration. That really kind of held the glue to this book together. One of the, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little later too. My book is grounded in a lot of biblical principles. And when I was first writing the book, I wasn't too sure because I could see the book being applicable to people of faith or not of faith. And I was like, which tone, how do I want to go with it? But as I wrote it, the more it became more theological, more beyond what I was expecting it to be. And so that was a huge inspiration, was my faith and my relationship with God. And another inspiration was just my experiences with mental health and challenges with it. I think we've done better as a society in combating mental health and, confronting the stigma, but I still think there's a lot of work and effort we could do. So, my book isn't necessarily focused on mental health, but it's definitely one underlying theme of it. And I'm curious to see if individuals will see it. I hope folks that might be struggling could kind of see it and find hope within it. Because to me, I mentioned passion isn't something that you find or do, but it's something that you experience and cultivate. And another way, I didn't go too deep into this in the book because I want to save it for another book focused on mental health. But I kind of see passion as this idea of mental health too, like this emotional well-being. I really define passion as the soul on fire. And we look at mental health as mental health, like of the mind. But what if we looked at it as soul health? Not just looking at just our thoughts, but realizing there's an interaction between our thought life, our emotional life, and our volitional life. And that all plays together in a symphony of who we are, what makes up our mental well-being.
I think about this topic certainly as mental health is coming up more and more. And I heard somebody the other day say something that really got my attention. They said, throughout school, right, we have all these different classes for, physical education, sex education, right? Where's the mental health education class? And I never thought about that before. And that really struck me. And certainly your story speaks to this. As you think back on this, months and months of writing and research, what do you think throughout your book? What was the most difficult chapter for you to put together and get on paper? And why?
Interesting. And I think it goes along with mental health. I think the most difficult chapter was, I believe it's in part 1, of why we struggle, because that's a loaded question. And I say it was difficult because I hope I did it justice, because there's a lot of reasons why we struggle. And I think one of the biggest points I want to get across in the chapter is that it's okay to struggle. Part 1 of my book focuses around the idea of fulfillment. And I think culture paints this picture that fulfillment is the absence of suffering. But what if fulfillment is truly the presence of peace amidst suffering? And I think it's really important to look at it that way, because we're going to go through life and encounter adversity. And, I'm 27 now, but as I've continually grown every year and year, there's different obstacles. I look back when I was like, and I experienced some challenges when I was growing up too, but life gets more challenging as you go. And I don't know how realistic it is to pursue a life with the absence of suffering. I think the question should be, how do we meet adversity? And that's where passion comes to play, right? Taking command of your thought life, your emotions, and your volition, and applying that to the adversity in hand. So that, if God's called us to do something bigger than ourselves, of course, we're going to experience challenging and maybe suffering along the way. But if we could, have that discipline to stay the test and stay firm amidst the suffering, and stay true to it, we'll have that impact bigger than ourselves, because fulfillment really isn't about us. What joys and pleasures of the world can I fill my soul with? I think fulfillment is what love and peace can I really fill in the souls of those around me? And sometimes that requires sacrifice and seasons of suffering,
Really incredible and a fascinating way to think about how many of us deal with adversity, right? So we can walk into it a couple different ways. And one is to say, all these things are happening to me and I'm just going to give up or quit, as you even considered early on in your book journey, as you talked about. And by the way, I did too, when I wrote my book. And having that different understanding of fulfillment and figuring out a way to get there, I think is just a fantastic message. Speaking of this journey and the struggle you went on, was there any learning you had about yourself during this journey?
During the writing journey specifically?
During the author journey. Yeah.
Yeah. During the author journey. Yes. It's funny. I knew I was a procrastinator, but this made me really realize how much of a procrastinator I was, which is funny, but it's going to sound funny. It's kind of cliche, but I learned that, I could become a morning person. And that was probably one of my favorite things, because when I woke up at 4 a.m., and this was only like 2 weeks. I don't want people to think I was doing this for 3 months. No, I only lasted 2 weeks doing this. But I like to get back to it because there's something so peaceful about being up 4 a.m., 5 a.m. when no one's really up yet. There's no distractions. You can scroll on social media if you want, but there's no one bothering you. And you could just really have this peace and really confront the deepest thoughts that you have. So that was one of the biggest things I learned from the journey, which is something I really hope to apply continually in my life, is this idea of waking up earlier. And whether it's journaling or prayer, studying scripture, those are things I really want to incorporate more into my life. It made me realize, how, again, another thing I learned too is you don't have to go the journey alone, whether it's a dream to write a book or encountering adversity in your life. I think it's really important to involve community, but I think you have to discern which individuals you let in on your challenges in life. But, I think sometimes our fear to let others in could stop us from, getting others come alongside of us. But I think it's really important. I actually talk about this in part 3 of my book too, actually. That's about how the Holy Spirit comes alongside people to empower them. So this idea of letting people in on your journey to empower you, come alongside you, I think is really important.
That takes a good bit of vulnerability, I think, right? And to expose yourself to someone like that and let them into that inner circle and see the struggle, this journey you're on, and ask for their help. And on that vein, you're pretty open about your mental health struggles that you've had in the book. Can you share us a little bit about that on your journey today and how things are going for you?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Speaking of vulnerability, it's funny. I know, especially because it's a long story, but it's interesting because I was nervous when I was writing the book to open up about certain things because I was curious what people would think, even more so with family, because I didn't want, this is quite a few years now and I'm in a great place now. But I was curious to see what would happen. But it's been positive since I've opened up in my book, and I'm happy I have, because I think it's easy to stay quiet about the challenges that we could face internally that no one knows about. Now, granted, I don't think everyone needs to know what's going on and one's struggling, but I think it's really helpful for a few people to know. But I had battled anxiety for a long time. Starting in probably 8th, 9th grade is when I really started to deal with anxiety, anxious thoughts, a little bit of depression. But at that age, I didn't really understand or know it, so I kept it to myself. Then I went to college, is when I really started to struggle with more severe anxiety and depression a little more sporadically. So I didn't start getting help until probably my sophomore year of school. But when I was in school for 5 years in a 5-year program, once I came around to my 5th year, that's when I really struggled with depression in a way that wasn't just for a couple of weeks, but it was predominantly the entire year, last year of school. And it was tough, but it's funny, I look back with gratitude, because if I didn't have that experience, this book would have never been what it was. One of the books I thought about writing when I was in college was like, oh, how can I empower college students to go beyond academics and have an impact, right? Great concept. But this book is so much deeper than a concept like that, but it's about really how to restore one's passion, restore one's soul. And what happened, what happened was when I was in my last year of school, I started to work with a Christian psychologist and really helped me, revitalize my faith. And it gave me a whole different perspective of mental health. I started to get hope, and I started to understand what I was struggling with, and realizing that there were ties to my childhood, and I always had this in the back of my mind. Like I knew I was struggling with anxiety. I knew I was dealing with depression, but I knew that there were reasons for it, but I just didn't know how to process and deal with that. My parents had gotten separated when I was about 9 or 10 years old. And my dad had struggled with addiction for a few years when I was growing up too. So I knew those planted seeds of rejection, abandonment, and plenty of other things, but I never knew how to really deal with that, how to reconcile that. And I knew that if I could walk through a journey of reconciling that, it would put me on a path to hope and restoration. And that's what happened. That last year, I went on that process to confront the pain I had experienced in my life head on. And it was a long journey. It didn't happen overnight. It took probably quite a couple of years. Like I can't tell you when I went from being struggling to being okay. It was like a very long, drawn out process. But I feel so blessed to say for the past couple of years, it's sometimes hard to talk about what I experienced with the mental health struggles when I was in college, because it feels like not even real, because it's just not what I feel now. It's hard to, I can almost express it. I don't use this word lightly, but it's almost like a miracle of where I was to where I'm at now. So it's interesting. And that was kind of sometimes hard to talk about in the book, because I had to go back to my journal to be like, did I really feel that way? Because I don't feel that way at all right now. So I took in a couple of journal entries while I was in school, and I look back, I go, whoa, it's amazing where I was and where I'm now. And thanks be to God and for that. And what I'll just say to others that are listening, if you are struggling with mental health, I really encourage you to get help. There is no shame in it at all. Seek help, get help. And if you're working with someone and you don't feel like they're helping, then go work with someone else because they're out there. But have hope. I know it might be hard to say that. And I know people would say that to me, but I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. But just seek help. Don't give up and keep pushing through because it gets better. I know it doesn't seem that way sometimes, but it does.
Quite a journey you've been on through your whole experience, different countries, and the struggles you've been through in mental health and how you found your way through is pretty darn impressive. And you developed this model, right, around passion with purpose. And did it come from that struggle, or share with us a bit about how you came up with that model, if you would?
It did. It absolutely did, and it's an amazing story because it brings together all of my experiences. So what happened was when Passion with Purpose was starting off as a club, there were three major words that were grounding it. The three words of inspiration, encouragement, and empowerment. And those three words are really at the foundations of the book as well. So, I those three words came to be because when it came to motivating students on campus, how do you really motivate others that are so busy with their academics to do things for a club? And I realized I learned from a leadership standpoint that if you keep them inspired, clear the vision, if you keep them encouraged, making them feel confident in what they're going to do, and empowered, meaning they have the resources to do what they're going to do, they'll be motivated to get it done, right? And fast forward to my last school, and this is when I was really struggling with my mental health. And when I was working with my Christian psychologist, he had taught me the three aspects of the soul. And this is a major theme of my book that I talk about, the three faculties of the soul being comprised of our intellect, our emotion, and our will. Intellect being our organ of thoughts, our emotions being our organ of affections and desires and feelings, and our will being the organ of our choices that we make and decision making. So I'll never forget it. I was in a car in Panama on spring break my last year, and what we were doing, a couple of friends and I, we were visiting all the bridges we had built, a part of that club called Bridges to Prosperity. So I'm sitting in the car, and I have this epiphany. I go, inspire, encourage, empower, intellect, emotion, will. Now, it wasn't that lateral, but I had the three groupings of words. And I just start drawing matching columns. I'm like, oh my gosh, inspiration affects intellect, encouragement affects emotion, and empowerment affects will. It blew my mind because I always wondered why those three words are so powerful, but it's because they're so powerful is because they are directly applicable to the three different aspects of the human soul. And that's where this whole idea of this passion and purpose model came to be. It's very much a leadership model you could use, but it even grown to be a spiritual model because in my book, I take that passion and purpose model and then I tie it to the Holy Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. And, you could ignite passion in someone else by inspiring them, encouraging them, and empowering them. But I've also learned too that you could let God ignite the passion within you by letting God the Father be the minister to our mind and our intellect, by letting Jesus be the encourager of our emotional life, and by the Holy Spirit coming along and being a minister to our will by empowering us. So when I started putting these three together, that's what really made this passion purpose model come together. It's like these triangles, and you could see it on my website and within the book. But it's a really interesting model. It's really the cornerstone of the book and passion with purpose. And really how I interact with anybody that I meet. If I'm whether it's a romantic relationship, a friendship, a colleague, I want to leave them feeling inspired, encouraged, empowered, because it's going to breathe life into them. I think we live in a world where people are all about taking. But what if we give? The words inspire, encourage, empower. It's not about taking from someone, you're pouring it to someone, because everyone is dealing with something in life. So if you could just focus on breathing life into their intellect, emotion, will through inspiration, encouragement, empowerment, you're going to make a difference. I always tell people, you don't need to be Tony Robbins to inspire someone. All you have to do is speak positively to somebody.
It's amazing what a positive attitude can do. And I love that you've created this structure to help people find that and develop it in their day-to-day lives. Mm-hmm. Clearly the book is rooted in your Christian faith, but do you think there are principles in here others can really benefit from?
Oh, absolutely. I think probably the biggest challenge I encountered in writing this book was which audience I wanted it to be, because I knew that it could be written in a way that was more broad and more inclusive of different faiths and just even the absence of it. Just, it's like I mentioned with that passion and purpose model, it's really like a leadership model. So you really could apply it in a lot of secular ways too. And I think as I wrote it, it was tough. I went back and forth for years. And I think that was one of the reasons why it took so long to write it, was which way I wanted to go. But in my mind, I really wanted to write it. That is the first book and let it be the foundation. And this was the toughest book I would say to write, because I really had to ground it in scriptural truth and theology. So it was more challenging, but it is certainly applicable to, I would say, all people. It really is. And actually, as I was walking to work today, I was kind of drafting up the vision for my next book. And it's going to really be centered around leadership and passion and the passion and purpose model, and really just focused on leading people and really impacting people from the inside out. So it's very much so applicable. And I'm going to write a second book just to really demonstrate that too.
I mean, so many great leadership principles you've talked about here, and empowering others, and having it be more about raising others up, and instead of about yourself. It's just so incredibly important. One other concept that you mentioned in the book that caught my attention was this idea of a passioneer. Can you share with us a little bit about what a passioneer is?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's quite a few different definitions. There's the faith-based definition of it, and then there's the more neutral definition of it. So from a faith standpoint, if you look at it like an engineer, a lot of engineers, they remove roadblocks so that the architect's vision for a building, for example, could come to life. So in a faith format, the idea of this passioneer is someone that comes alongside someone to help them remove the barriers that could be in the way of them developing a relationship with God, to really uncover what their calling is in life and really be lit up and on fire, from the Holy Spirit to continue forth in their life. That's one definition that I use for it. And another definition, and I would use in a leadership model, is that a passioneer does those three things. They inspire people, encourage people, and empower people. They're building people up and edifying them from the inside out, right? So that's why it's funny. It brings my background in engineering to life. And that's what's really interesting about, the word, because, you're not really an engineer, but you're removing these roadblocks by inspiring, encouraging, empowering people. It's building people up from the inside out. And I believe we're all called to be, in a way, a passioneer. How can I help someone be more passionate, right? By being someone that inspires, encourages, and empowers.
I like this idea of marrying an engineer with delivering and helping people with passion, and probably have some structure in there as well, I think is what you're getting at, which I really appreciate. So when you think about this whole book and this amazing journey you've been on and all this work you've done, what do you think is the key message or lesson you want leaders to take away from your book?
Wow. So many. I guess how I'll answer is based on what comes to mind. But I really think it comes down to the concept of seeking a life where you're building passion and not necessarily trying to find passion. And also this idea of that suffering's okay, right? Passion itself, it literally means to suffer. Passion means to suffer. So I think one of the messages I would really share with folks is embrace the suffering that you endure in life, because a fulfilling life isn't about me. It's not about you, but it's about the people around you. And I've learned that when we overcome our struggles, we're put in a position to really encourage other people and come alongside them, and I think that's truly important.
Help others. Don't be afraid to invite people into your journey and let them help you when necessary. Powerful, powerful message. Steve, I really appreciate the thoughts you have here. If people want to learn more about you and your book, where can they go to find you?
Yeah. So the quickest way, you can go to my website, www.passionwithpurpose.life. You can find information on the book, and you could find all of the links to my social media as well. But if you want to follow me quickly on social media, just search Steven with a V, F period, Mezzacappa.
Passion with Purpose, The Fire Within, Building a Life of Fulfillment, Destiny, Impact is now available wherever you buy books online. Go out and get your copy today. Steve, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be with you.
I'm your host, John Saunders. Keep moving forward.